Welcome everybody back to the DomCast episode 49, and for those of y'all wondering, yes, I am doing fine. I did say last podcast I would never ever recover if Boston didn't make up for game 5. They did. They made up for game 5 and some. This team is in the conference finals in a bracket that is surprisingly winnable. But we're going to dive into that. By we, I mean me and Alvini Linguini. If you were in the Twitch streams, you know he's been in the watch parties. He's also an NBA YouTuber himself. Alvini, welcome back.
Good to be back. Definitely good to be back to talk some more NBA basketball.
Yeah, man, we do not have much longer left. This has been a very... I don't know if I say quick. It just feels quick because I've been doing watch parties for like every game that I possibly could. Damn, Memphis and Minnesota feels like it was months ago. As a classic 6-game series. Had some great playoff moments, and here we are now with 4 teams left, and there's no breaks this week. The series are just going to go straight through as far as I have seen. So we will be doing our predictions for those after we dive into a little bit of what happened in the second round, because yeah, at least in one of these series there was definitely some fuckery. There was a Chris Paul disaster class. As a matter of fact, that's the series we're definitely going to start with. It's a little bit early in the morning, so I have to dribble around a little bit, get some shots up, and then we will discuss a potential NBA Finals. For the viewers out there, this podcast is on Spotify, it is on Apple Podcasts, it's on YouTube. So if you're listening on any of the platforms, you can rate it. YouTube like button, Spotify stars, Apple the review, much appreciated. Let's go ahead and yeah, we're gonna kick it off with the elephant in the room, because Dallas is in the Western Conference Finals. And to Mavericks fans, y'all have been added to the apology tour. I will happily take this L. The apology tour involved the Pelicans from earlier in the season. They came out basically dead within 13 games. That we've been through that plenty of times. They got their apology. Dallas, they did it. They won 4 games against Phoenix. I said I cannot see them winning more than 2. Even as the series was tied, I thought Phoenix was going to get it together. I would never, ever, ever have been able to predict the events that would transpire. Mostly Game 7, because everything else was just the home team being completely dominant. But Game 7 was a collapse of the likes I have never seen, of which I have never seen. Alvini, what was your reaction watching Game 7 or to Game 7?
Honestly, I knew that Luka Doncic would have his whole impact. I said it plenty of times, and people have been agreeing with me that the Clippers did their job of making sure that one of the best players, in our era was going to ever get out of the first round. And as soon as we were out, now everybody else has to see the horror that is Luka Doncic. And now the Suns fans know about it, because he came there Game 7, laughed after every single bucket he put up. Spencer Dinwiddie scored 30 off the bench. And you could see how deflated the Suns were after halftime. It was glorious to watch, because even you said this is the most entertaining blowout I have ever seen. And I was pretty entertained by it myself, seeing how cocky the Suns were and just how they thought it was going to be like last year. But the few times they went against a healthy team was the few times they ended up losing in a series. And it happened again.
Yeah, it's a terrible look. It's a very, very terrible look. First of all, I am not one of the basketball sickos that's going to try to convince you that I have liked watching blowouts before. Yeah, full transparency. This is the first blowout that I truly liked. I stayed on stream through halftime because they were getting their ass beat so thoroughly and so maniacally that I had to see how it ended. I had to see another half of it. It was the point where I saw, and I was watching it, but there was so much going on that until the buzzer sounded, I didn't realize they had only 27 points in the first half of a Game 7. They had 27 points, and Luka matched that. It caught me off guard for multiple reasons, because like I said, every home team was more, the pendulum just kept swinging back to the home team. So Game 7, I was like, yeah, the Suns are probably, I wanted to be competitive, but I actually thought the Suns would end up winning it in a blowout. And I just want to know Like, I can't wait for the behind the scenes for this one to come out. Because first of all, like I said, credit to Dallas. Dallas is a very solid team. They are running a system that we've seen before, where you have a star player and then a lot of shooters. Sometimes you have a team like that has great defense. Sometimes you don't. Dallas happens to have great defense, and it hasn't broken down yet. They're in the conference finals. They've taken out a 64 win team, and I'm just never gonna pretend like I thought that could happen. So all credit to the Dallas Mavericks, and we'll be diving into specifically some of what they did. But for Phoenix, I need to know what actually happened, like, behind the scenes, because Game 7 was noticeably different than any other game. There's been blowouts, and Phoenix they lost the plot in a couple of games, even if they were hanging around in Dallas and they would end up getting blown out. That's happened. But you noticed the energy, right? They came out and it looked like nobody wanted to be there. And I'm just kind of wondering what happened in between Game 6 and Game 7. Guys did not want to be there. They were not executing, purposely not rotating. There was no energy. DeAndre Ayton did not want to play. Monty Williams asked him if he still wanted to play. He said no. So he ended up, not getting that many minutes. Chris Paul, and it didn't just start in Game 7 for Paul. His aggressiveness went down as the series continued in terms of him looking for a shot. Yeah, you know what? I do, but go ahead, please.
Oh, yeah, because Mark Spears ended up saying that he may have had a bruised quadriceps muscle in his leg, which, obviously slows him down and makes, all the aspects of basketball worse on him, which ended up messing up his whole production out there. And due to that, I was questioning if he should have even been playing in the first place, especially with him being 36 and all that. So it probably just slows him down another step because of that.
The Chris Paul injury. I'm not even sure what to call it at this point. Chris Paul injury.
It's as old as time itself.
And the thing is, nobody is good. So here's the thing about that, right? First of all, that's basically turned into a joke online, because as they were getting beat down in Game 7, I think Patrick Beverley was the one who started it. He said, watch for the injury report, or whatever he said. He said something along the lines of, they're basically going to say that there was an injury, and it ended up being the first time that we heard about the thing with Chris Paul. Now, I'm willing to believe that. I am willing to believe that, because when we talk about basketball, I try to have nuance and not just go fully off of narratives. I'm willing to believe that there was some injury there, but at the same time, I'm fully aware that nobody cares, just because of how much the Suns team has benefited from injury in the past. B, and again, because as I was watching it, before that even became a thing, before Patrick Beverley even said it, I started to wonder that myself. I was like, okay, probably around the third bad game he had, or third non-aggressive game he had, I started to wonder, okay, when's the news going to come out? Is there something wrong with his hand? Is there something wrong? There just had to be something to it. But at this point, he had a bad NBA Finals last year. You come in against a Dallas team that and I'm not sure how people feel about it. I still think Phoenix was the better team. In this case, they just lost. They're not going to get any leeway for it. And then also, I hope it doesn't take away from the credit of Dallas either, because they did adjust defensively, playing up on him and not letting him get to his mid-range shot that he has been absolutely terrorizing with. The adjustment to bring in Frank Ntilikina and the job that he did on defense. So he's no longer a meme. Yeah, Ntilikina is no longer just a meme on NBA Twitter. Like, he made a difference in this series. Booker shot like 1 of 6 against him, something like that, for the possessions that he was in. So that was an adjustment that was made. I personally am not going to take away credit from Dallas, because at this point, I can't remember how long we've been talking about Chris Paul, but I had been saying it in videos and other times when we discuss CP3. At this point, injuries are a feature, not a bug, when it comes to Paul. In the playoffs, that it's a feature now. It happens. Happened last year, happened years before that. This is just what ends up happening one way or the other. That's something that you kind of just account for. You hope every year, like when he's leading a good team, you hope it's not going to show its head. And so you think, okay, like this year, I definitely thought Phoenix would, had a great chance to get to the NBA Finals. But at a certain point, even when you're doing these long predictions, you never predict the player getting injured, but you literally just have to account for it at this point, I feel like, with Phoenix. So that did come out, but I still would like to shine some light on Dallas's defense. And I want to get your thoughts because I talked about him a little bit on the podcast last week, but I wanted to get your thoughts on DeAndre Ayton. And did you have any specific thoughts about him in the series, his play down low? And then I'll go because I had actually been looking ahead to series after this and how Ayton would affect things. And now that's a whole thing because in the offseason, they have choices to make. And I'll let you go and then we'll get to that.
Yeah, because obviously I thought he was going to play a bigger role considering that his matchup as a starter would be Dwight Powell. And then outside of that, it'd be like a Maxi Kleber or something else. And like you said, his aggressiveness definitely seemed to be very questionable out there. He didn't have any dominant games and wasn't taking advantage of what was given to him. So now, like you said, it kind of gives the front office more ammo to use that against him when it comes to money. And obviously, he's going to want that max being the first overall pick in the same draft class that Luka Doncic was in and everything. And it's not going to work to his advantage because, like I said, a lot of those guys out there really weren't doing what they were supposed to do. And he and Chris Paul was at the forefront of that. Honestly, like I said, I'm surprised. When I was watching those games, I was surprised he wasn't doing more. And I'm surprised Monty Williams didn't make him more of a feature in that offense because they was doing more out in the perimeter than anything else. But at the same time, that's kind of been his role all season. Chris Paul and Devin Booker kind of just feed him down low to do something simple, or they give him the lob, the Jay Crowder lob, or just something simple. They don't ever really make him the forefront of the offense. So at one point, I'm surprised, and at the other point, I'm kind of not surprised because that's kind of how they've been doing it all season.
Yeah. I had basically been worried after this because he wasn't, like you said, he wasn't having dominant games. He wasn't having bad games, but he wasn't having dominant games. And against, a Maxi Kleber or Dwight Powell, which, by the way, I'm not sure how much of it is Kleber versus how much of it is Ayton's aggressiveness because this is just who he is. But against that lineup of bigs, I was kind of looking for him and the Suns to put him in position to impose his will a little bit more because my mind went to if they get out of the West, any of the teams that they have left to play are going to have a pretty imposing big man, whether it's Boston and you got Al Horford on you who's still good defensively, or it's Miami without Adebayo, or it's the Bucks where he has to deal with Giannis again, or if Philly somehow got it, it was Embiid. So I was looking at that and worried because we know, especially throughout the season, Ayton was doing fine with the hooks, but against Mavericks and just in general, it seems like he doesn't often get great position down low. And I'd see him settle a lot to just kind of turn around and take a fadeaway when he could force the issue a little bit and get a bit deeper position. And I was seeing that against this Mavericks team, and I'm going, man, this is really gonna become a problem when they play someone who's actually, if this is what he settles for now, it's not going to get better basically in the finals. And I was already worried about that. And so, yeah, of course, there's basic ways with Chris Paul to use him in the pick and roll, and he can still get his 20 points. But I was already worried about that. And yeah, he was never truly dominant here. And now there's problems because we hadn't talked about it yet, but with the whole thing with Monty Williams asking him if he wanted to play. After the game, they asked him about that, and Monty Williams said, oh, it's internal, basically like it's a team thing. And one of the first videos I made this season was talking about like not doing these type of things to your star players in terms of the contract. Like when the opportunity comes up to pay them, generally you just pay them. And right. The Suns, even with the conversation we're having now about Ayton's aggressiveness, which has been a thing, by the way, it's not just this playoffs. I think as a big and with some of these matchups, I've seen him settle quite a bit. Especially in this series, God, there had to be about 4 examples of him catching the ball and not even knowing he was open, where he could just turn around and dunk it, basically, or turn around and put it up. And it was like I don't know, it's just like the awareness just wasn't there. However, if you're the Suns team, since the beginning, that's the argument I was making in the very first video I made. It's not like you can let him go. Unless you have a sign-in trade in place for something that's going to, be equivalent or better or whatever, you're kind of in position where you cannot let DeAndre Ayton go. As better as he could be, you can't really do that. But also now you see these problems have started, and he's always felt like he deserves some money. a certain amount of money. Now they have to go into the offseason dealing with that. If the morale gets to a certain place, all of a sudden you're looking at this whole thing falling apart. But I guess that's a conversation mostly for the offseason. It's just they have an interesting one coming up now because of the way this ended. And you know, it's a larger conversation of the way this ended. The seventh game.
I know one of the main things also is the fact that will they even be better off next year? Because what more improvement can you see? Because I thought the Suns would be better off this year because of the additions that they made to their team. And as we saw, again, they went against a healthy team and ended up losing in that series. So is there going to be any more improvement from people like Devin Booker or a DeAndre Ayton, who's been the X factor all season for them?
Yeah, and and to that point, who's out there? If I don't know how many of y'all listening have looked at the free agency class, but there isn't one. Basically, this summer, this is not a free agency class at all. So everything that'll be done to improve teams is practically through trades. So that's kind of how you have to look at it. There's not a star free agent out there to just snag up unless, you know, somebody like Kyrie Irving, something happens with that. And that has nothing to do with Phoenix as they have a point guard anyways. Yeah, they have to look to improve by obviously getting somebody who can really hold the fort with Chris Paul. And then I thought it was interesting. I don't know if you saw the ESPN the first take segment where Patrick Beverley and JJ Redick were actually discussing basketball. It's pretty cool. And JJ Redick was talking about the Suns' shot profile and how basically in the modern NBA, they just didn't get enough threes up. They go to the mid-range a lot, and Dallas was able to adjust to that. And without having a solid plan to, you know, basically shoot enough threes, like Dallas, it's like two opposing philosophies, right? And Dallas was able to adjust and kind of take that mid-range away from Phoenix. Dallas, meanwhile, they, you know, as much as we clowned Utah, and deservingly, by the way, because it fucking turnstiles, but still though, Dallas at this point has shown they can get to that three pretty much whenever they want, and it has a lot to do with, you know, Luka just being Luka. But now they've done it to Phoenix too. The game 7 didn't what he had. Obviously, he just went straight and one mixtape, which I didn't see happening at that level, but he did it. Jalen Brunson applies a lot of pressure, you know, basically backing down guys. And if he can't just drive by him, he uses his strength instead. That's a nice adjustment for this Phoenix series to get himself into it, because he was able to just blow by guys on Utah. And then they can go to the 5 out and basically always have a corner 3 open or a wing 3 open. And so now they've done it to a contending team. It's really interesting what that's going to look like going into Golden State, which we'll be talking about later. But for now, yeah, Dallas, man, they figured this out. Look, Chris Paul, I know by now you're familiar with, everybody's familiar with the Patrick Beverley segment yesterday, the Cone segment. And like whatever, you know, about the Cone dialogue is whatever. But I came into this series wondering about the level that they would kind of hunt Chris Paul. And I didn't know it was going to be this bad. Like Luka, he was looking for Chris Paul and getting his body into him, and he could score on anybody, but especially Chris Paul. That was something that became a problem for Phoenix. And on the Suns side, I thought they were going to be able to win because I thought they had a lot of advantages that they could go to, but they just kind of didn't though at a certain point. Like, did it occur to you, or did you see, you know, the video from B-Ball Breakdown talking about Phoenix basically stopped going to the Spain pick and roll, which was a feature that was working, and they just literally stopped throughout this series? Had you picked up on that?
Definitely. And at the same time, to your credit, like I was telling other people, the Suns are playing like a 90s team. Like I think they are bottom 5 in 3-point attempts per game. You know, Devin Booker's never been much of a 3-point shooter. Chris Paul has taken down his 3-point shot more and more as he gotten older. And, you know, outside of that, you know, one of their main quote unquote threats, whenever he feels like it, is Jay Crowder. And then outside of that is Mikal Bridges, and then nobody else really goes out there and shoots threes. So yeah, to your credit, like you said, the Mavericks are one of the more efficient 3-point shooting teams, and outside of their losses, that was one of the few ways they were able to keep in these games, is just through shooting threes. You know, Maxi Kleber was almost shooting 50-50 from the 3-point line, and other people were out there contributing to that as well. I just remember game 1, he went like 6 of 6 or something like that, even though they still ended up losing. But he was one of the major contributors to them to be able to stay in that game, and other people ended up following suit also.
Yeah. It's just funny where the NBA has gone, that you can have a great season doing what Phoenix did, and especially because their defense was solid, they had a lot of things that they could go to. You could win a ton of regular season games, but then you get to the playoffs and end up losing to a more talented team because of the style that you play and some questionable decisions. Like I said, the fact that their offense that was working kind of changed up midway through the series is extremely puzzling, and I always wonder with how much how much coaching plays a part in today's league. I just wonder about certain decisions because they can clearly see what's happening.
Yeah, you know how it is in the playoffs. It's all about scouting out the team and then adjusting on a game-to-game basis. You don't do that type of stuff in the regular season. You save that stuff for the playoffs. And Jason Kidd, despite how people were treating him in the beginning of the season, beginning of his hire there, he has definitely came through and turned the team not of very, very good defenders into a good, solid team defensive model. And we've seen that, like you was talking about earlier with the Suns, with how they was able to handle and box in Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and to his credit, again, actually using Frank Ntilikina and not just having him just be on the bench, just sitting there. Probably their best, or at least their top three one-on-one defenders out there on the perimeter too.
Yeah, and I've got to give Jason Kidd, aside from just X's and O's adjustments, I really like, how he approaches coaching the star player, because he was not afraid to say in the media that Luka Doncic has to participate in defense, things like that, and how he's, the conversations that he's having with him and working on that side of the ball. Because it was only really one game where it was noticeable, but the game that Chris Paul and Booker basically started hunting him, I thought that was going to become a theme throughout the series. And I would say I saw some pretty solid defensive possessions from Luka throughout the as the series went on. And so I like that from Kidd, because not every coach will, even if they do coach a star player like that, not all of them will tell the media that they're saying those type of things, or even acknowledge it. Because I'm not sure, and I could be totally wrong, but I'm not sure how much I've ever heard a coach talk about Trae Young's defense to the media, or saying that he's got to participate. You don't always hear that type of thing. So shout out to Jason.
He just obviously sees better in Luka, because he could obviously go out there and play defense if he wanted to. Defense is mostly about effort anyways, and right. Jason Kidd being one of the better two-way guards in NBA history, obviously he would want to see that in his players also.
Right. So wrapping up this Dallas Phoenix series, again, shout out to Mavericks fans. Luka has one of the more legendary moments now in his young career, when they were down 2-3 and he walks in the locker room saying everybody's acting tough when they're up, and he proceeds to absolutely dominate the first seed. That's going to be in the documentary 20 years from now. So that's a very cool moment to witness. Him and Booker, that became a little bit of a thing, and that's been put to bed. Like, that's been that night that's gone now. That whole
picture that they have together at the free throw line is gold.
Yeah, and Booker saying the Luka special, just to turn around and actually get the Luka special. Yep. Yeah. Hey, that's why I said I want to know what happened in between games, because they were doing a lot of talking. Phoenix was doing a lot of talking. There was a lot of extra stuff going on, and then to not come out and even play in the game 7, I don't even know. Shout out to you all if you're a Dallas fan. I will, again, you can ask me this 5 years from now, and I will say, nah, I didn't give them a chance against Phoenix. I will gladly take my L, because that was a fold. That was.
But to just add one more thing to it, what was they was down by as most as like 37, I think it was.
My friend texted me and said that it was actually 40 something. Was it not?
It was 40 something. Well, I will say also, it kind of shows how their team structure works, because, me being a Clippers fan, I got to mention this, us having a team that was like 42-40, be able to go and come back 35 down against the Hampton Warriors, one of the better teams that we've ever seen. And then for them to be down 30 and then just give up, it just kind of shows how things kind of work over there for them not to even think they can come back from that.
Yeah, and that's the term that I've been throwing around over these last few days, and I don't do it often, but in my eyes, they gave up. Aiden didn't want to play. Again, at a certain point, I was just fucking appalled on stream. I was looking at their offense. I'm like, bro, they're not even trying anymore. It's just Devin Booker, rim running basically and trying to hit it off the glass. There's nothing going on this offensive side or the defensive side. I want to know what happened. That's it. when the story comes out, just remember Dom was always curious about what happened, because it feels like something happened in the locker room off court, and they came out and they were just like, we don't fuck with each other no more. I never seen anything like it. That is an all-time collapse. And shout out to you, Vini, because the Clippers had a crazy collapse in 2020, and that was a series collapse, but still, Phoenix, like, I think it was a little bit different. The Nuggets just started outplaying them, like.
Oh yeah, Jokic went out and said that they kept doing the same thing over and over again. So all we had to do was just change it up and know that they weren't going to do anything. And again, that's one of the main gripes I had with Doc Rivers. He's not a man of change.
Yeah,
he'll keep things the absolute same and risk his job over doing that exact same thing.
Yeah, and so Phoenix came out, and maybe it's just recency bias, but that at least for one game, that collapse seemed worse. And we'll be getting to Doc in a little bit when we get to the East side. For now, we are going to go to the other Western series that I'm not sure we'll have as much to say about. Wasn't as appalling. Golden State ends up winning the series 4-2 against the Memphis Grizzlies. A lot of things happened in terms of guys being in and out, whether it was suspension, whether it was injury. Gary Payton didn't get to play past game, like what, 1 or 2, whatever it was, but then and that didn't end up even really factoring in once John Morant went out. Memphis, they really still fought without him, as they have the entire season. They were right there. They were on the doorstep to get into a game 7 until Golden State pushed it to a 6-point lead, and you can kind of tell it was over there, because being down 6 to Golden State in the fourth quarter is really like being down 10 or 12 because of the pace at which they start catching fire. So overall, I thought this was a fun series. Again, I really hate that Ja went out, just because I feel like he was, doing exactly what I expected him to after the Minnesota series. Minnesota had made it their entire life's goal and employed every tool they had to make him struggle in round 1. Golden State did not have the same tools or philosophy, so he was able to get free, and he was able to, be way more effective. The fact that he doesn't really have a mid-range game or whatever didn't matter as much here, because he started shooting more threes. He was able to get to his layups. So it was about, I would say the Golden State Memphis series was about everything that I expected. I came into it from months ago knowing that this series was probably going to happen. I was viewing it like the 2010 Lakers and Thunder, because Memphis, I guess, is a little bit ahead of that schedule, being 2nd seed, but I still felt like the entire time, once they got into the series, if Golden State was healthy, which coming into it, I didn't know, like Steph returned in the playoffs, and Draymond, that was pretty much his first action too. So I thought, like, okay, well, if they're wounded, Memphis can probably get them. Once we come in and see, okay, everybody's pretty much here, and the big 3 are here, thought that, it went pretty much how I thought it would. But it's going to be interesting going forward, just because Memphis, as long as they keep the same energy and have a successful offseason and guys get better, like, it probably won't. I think we underrate. Golden State is getting up there in age. They've been around for a long time now, and because
Dylan Brooks made a very good point talking about how they're on the decline and we on the up. I'm like, he ain't wrong about saying that. He's certainly not wrong.
He's not wrong. Like, it's 2022. They're about to, if they can beat Dallas, they'll be going to their 6th NBA Finals. It's the same core. Guys are getting up into their upper 30s, and they're going to keep retooling. People will probably keep coming to Golden State and to keep retooling, but everybody ages out at a certain point. So it's going to be interesting to see what pressure young teams, specifically Memphis, apply in the future, because that's kind of how it happened with the Lakers and the Spurs of the West. They were really good until an injury either just stopped it, or they just simply aged out. Like, the Spurs pretty much aged out, and then the whole thing happened with Kawhi Leonard. It'll be interesting to see what path that follows the Golden State, because if they can follow the Spurs path without a guy leaving, basically, hopefully they can get like 1 or 2 stars to play with this Golden State core, and as that Golden State core ages out, you have the young guys to carry that mantle. That's what they were trying with Kawhi and the Marcus Aldridge, what San Antonio was trying. So see how that happens in the next years of Golden State. But yeah, I'm curious what you think of Golden State, because while they are in the conference finals, by the way, they've been in the conference finals every year since 2015 if the big 3 are healthy and they're playing. But I'm wondering, based off of this series and kind of what you've seen up to the playoffs in this up to this point, do you see them as the same type of threat that you've seen in previous years, or are you looking and maybe thinking they're a bit vulnerable because Steph, like Clay up until game 6, he wasn't really having a great series. I wouldn't say Steph in terms of shooting hasn't really felt like super Steph, and they've kind of been able to figure it out as they've gone. Of course, you played Denver, and that was a great matchup for you. And still disposing of Memphis without Ja was still impressive because, again, they were great. They did a great team all season without Ja. But yeah, I'm curious about your thoughts on this series and Golden State moving forward.
Yeah, they're definitely not as imposing as I remember them being. Stephen Curry's three ball isn't going down as it used to. Klay Thompson the same. Now they do have someone to come through and take that from them in Jordan Poole. But at the same time, you already know how the system's going to stay. Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green, and then, the other cast of characters. But I do feel like they are a whole lot vulnerable as they used to be. They're not as strong offensively as they used to be. They're now a whole lot more defensively oriented than they were in past years. And that's why I thought that Memphis was going to be able to shock them a little bit if they were healthy, mainly because of the grudge that they had from what was it, last year or 2 years ago?
Last year.
Yeah, last year. And then at the same time, how much firepower the Memphis Grizzlies has. Because I thought they were still going to be able to compete, which they did in that one game, and possibly shock them a little bit if the slumps kept happening. Because we have seen some slumps when it comes to Golden State over and over again, and even had that one slump when Ja Morant was out. And I'm like, if they're doing this with Ja Morant out, I can only imagine what happens when they get to the next round against a Phoenix who is also imposing defensively, or a Dallas and they have to deal with Luka. And now that's exactly what that's going to be. And then someone did ask me, who's going to be guarding Luka? I'm like, the whole team's going to be guarding Luka because you have to deal with pick and rolls every single second. But I feel like we are seeing the decline of the Golden State Warriors. It's going to suck that it's going to happen that way because Wiggins isn't going to go out there and give you 30 like he would used to. He's probably very, set on his not role playing, but on his role player role. And then you have Stephen Curry, who isn't able to get that shot down like he used to. Klay Thompson, even though he did have his game 6 moment as he usually does, you're not going to see that consistently like you used to. Draymond isn't aggressive offensively at all. And from there, your only wild card that you really have is a Jordan Poole.
Yeah, and that's why
their system works, but it's just, I don't know if they're going to be able to pull it off again.
Yeah, so going forward, that is kind of what I'm looking at, because once you go, and I don't think Denver or Memphis with their health problems were able to really keep up with Golden State's execution, because Golden State just out executed Memphis at some important times of a couple of these games. Like game 1, I thought Memphis had at least 1 or 2 young moments at the end of the game that ended up costing them. And then in the last couple of games, I think that they were close games at the end, but I really feel like that's where they could have used Ja Morant. That's where you can use your star player, your star pressure point. Desmond Bane dealing with a back injury throughout the series. He was not quite the same as he was in the Minnesota series. So Golden State is able to rely on a lot of their execution to get out of this. But when you look at the splits, it's 40% from Klay Thompson from the field. It's 32% from 3 for Steph and 41% overall. Jordan Poole wasn't as great in the series, 31% from 3. And you wonder, once you play against a team that can output the same fire you can, do you end up hanging on some of these? Is it enough to just be able to execute better at the end of games, or do you even get to that point? Do you get the same advantages of getting to that point when you're going against a team that might execute a little bit more potently than you on offense? Because at this point, the PTSD lineup for Golden State, I don't think it panned out like we thought it would. In those first 2 games at Denver, we thought we had found like the new thing, and it has some uses, but it's not like the Golden State death lineups of the past, as we've seen time advance. It's not really like that. So good win against Memphis Grizzlies. As I said, I didn't really have the same type of energy for this series. It more or less ended at 6. That was my original prediction. So everything I've said about this series beforehand is kind of, it's on display here. I think that there was just just besides all the extra stuff like with Morant's knee injury and the whole shitstorm that was with basically accusing Jordan Poole of hurting him, which we later found out wasn't really a thing. And everything else that happened, like I said, excited for the future, because I wouldn't say there's bad blood here, but there's real competitive fire between these two teams. And we at least saw that much. It didn't go 7, but we at least saw that much. And if it's able to just stay on this track, like a year or two from now, Memphis will be able to beat them. But right now, it's still, it's Golden State hanging on to this dynasty, which is, it's headed toward 10 years. If you look at 2015, we're only 3 years away from 2025. It'll be interesting to see how long they can hold on. And part of that will be beating Dallas. So let's go ahead and hop into that series and finish up the Western Conference. So 3-seeded Warriors team, 4-seeded Dallas team. Did not expect the Mavericks to be here, but here's what I say about this series. And just some preliminary thoughts. First of all, as far as I know and what I looked at, I don't think we've actually seen a matchup between these two teams as they are with like healthy Golden State and Dallas since they traded. I don't think there's actually been a matchup that we can really draw from. I know Dallas had Porzingis when they were playing, so there's not a whole lot to look at there. I will say, however, like my initial thoughts of this series is not that it's just a wash or that the Warriors have a cakewalk here or that they got an easy matchup. Because I'll tell you, years ago when the Warriors used to get to the conference finals and avoid playing the Clippers because they choked or something like that, I always felt like, damn, I wanted to see them play the Clippers. I wanted to see them play Chris Paul and them, because the Clippers still had pretty good teams. As much as we clown those rosters, I always wanted to see them play Golden State again, as Golden State was actually good, and we never got it because something would happen before that would happen, and I would go, damn, like in 2015, Golden State had to play Houston in the third round instead of the Clippers, and I felt like that even though Houston beat them fair and square, I still felt like, damn, this is kind of a bail. But anyways, so the Suns, that would have been cool, but I don't feel like it's a bail though. I don't feel like they caught a break here playing Dallas. You're going against
not at all.
Yeah, this is not a break. This is a good defensive team, and what we've seen at this point is we got what we wanted. You mentioned it a little bit at the beginning. I too wanted to see Luka play against another team than the Clippers in the playoffs. I was curious how somebody else would handle it. Somebody else who didn't have a Kawhi Leonard to put on him as the series wore on and kind of wear him out a little bit. I was always wondering about that, and it more or less, it looks like how I thought it could look if it really got off the hook. And so in this Phoenix series, we saw Luka cook pretty much everybody that they put on him. He had some tough shooting nights, but really, I feel like every Dallas win, Luka contributed heavy to whether he shot well or not, because he was still able to get to his spots. He was able to generate other open shots, and he was able to go on stretches that would change the game pretty often. That's what happened in Game 7. He set that tone from the beginning. I'm looking at that in the Dallas series, and fam, and when you talk about hunting and them knowing that certain players or certain guys they don't want on Luka, they're going to be going at that. First of all, even if you have a good or decent defender, Luka can score on him too. That's one thing.
Yep.
But so I'm looking now going, he's going to be looking for Steph. They're going to be looking for Steph on switches. That's going to happen. You're going to be looking for Jordan Poole as much as you can. That's going to happen. And Klay Thompson and Wiggins, and I'm assuming you're probably going to see some Kuminga minutes in here too. The Warriors are going to have to throw everything they possibly can at him, and it's still probably not going to slow him down. And Dallas is still going to be able to generate open shots. And just that at the beginning makes me kind of worry about Golden State's ability here, because Dallas has shown that they will adjust and they will look for those matchups relentlessly. And when you try to keep guys like Steph out of those matchups, or you try to keep Poole out of that matchup, that's a great way for Dallas to swing the ball and get open shots. And then you look at the Warriors' best defender in Draymond Green. You're not gonna put Draymond Green on Luka and shut him down or stop him, and also that create matchup problems.
There's gonna be a potential flagrant waiting to happen if that happens, bro.
Yeah, and that's not gonna stop him anyways, and then that's gonna create a mismatch elsewhere. So right off the bat, I am interested to see how or if they are able to utilize Draymond in trying to slow him down. But those are just some initial thoughts I have about it. I'd like to hear yours. I didn't really talk about Golden State and how they match with them yet, but I did want to make it clear just because Dallas, I didn't see them getting out of the second round. This is not some cake-ass team to me. I think there's a legitimate chance Dallas could win the series.
Yeah, and my main point I'm about to make is this is a very hot Dallas Mavericks team and a very, very just motivated Luka Doncic. He's coming in his third time in the playoffs. You know, he had to go through the hurdles of going through the Clippers 2 times and lost both times. Now, you know, he's beat the best team in the NBA, and now he's about to go, you know, he's just one step away from getting into the finals and possibly being the favorites in said finals, depending on the matchup. He's probably not going to be stopped. Like I'm definitely predicting at least a 35 point per game game in this series, especially when you also consider that, like you said, they'll have to throw the whole kitchen sink at him, and he's going to have fun dismantling that kitchen sink. If he's over here psychotically laughing every time that he scores on the Suns, I can only imagine what he's going to do on the Warriors. And then you have to consider also that all the shooters on this team is hot too. This is basically business as usual for the Warriors. Like you said, they've been there 6 times already. This is something new for the Dallas Mavericks. They haven't been this far since, the 2011 finals? 2011 season?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So they're definitely fired up to see what they can do. They're probably going to either drop one of the first 2 games over there at the Chase Arena to try to, figure out what the Warriors are going to do. And then Jason Kidd, like we've already seen it, he's just going to follow according to what they do and then fix it like that. Because again, I'm not really too enthused about how the Warriors have been going about things offensively. Like, because they got it off easy when it came to the Nuggets. Like, and even then, sometimes they didn't make it look that convincing. And then they went to the Memphis Grizzlies, who I thought could potentially upset them. And still there was that sign of weakness. And now they're going against a really, really legit and hot team in the Mavericks. And there's a good chance they lose in 6 or 7, in my eyes. Because if Luka isn't going to get shut down, then you already know everybody else is just going to have open shots and open opportunities to do things. And then at the same time, with how they was able to dismantle the Suns, who were top 5 in offensive production this year, then you already know they want to end up having to make a plan to stop everybody else, especially if they don't end up hot themselves.
Yeah, and I guess that's my concern here. 2 things. First of all, like we just went over the shootings, and I completely agree, like you said, even though they beat Denver 4-1, a lot of those games were not convincing, and they didn't feel like they got away as they should have, even as guys were getting hurt in Denver. And then what happened in the Memphis series with their shooting splits, I don't feel like Dallas in their current state and what they've shown they can do, I don't feel like this is a series where Steph and Clay can just have pedestrian shooting numbers for them anyways. And hell, same for Poole. It cannot just be pedestrian here, because Dallas is they're going to keep shooting until they hit that shit. Like, they're going to keep going, and they might have a game where where the shots aren't falling. I think that happened in the Phoenix series and some of their losses where their looks just weren't going. And so that, when you live by 3 or die by 3, which by the way, that I wouldn't necessarily say Dallas does, because they do have other points that they get to, but still though, threes is a huge part of it. And the games that they're not falling don't look the same, but in the games where they are falling, okay, now you can't have Steph shooting 30% from 3, and you can't have Clay just have his game 6 and that be basically the main thing that happened. So that's one thing. And also how they dealt with John Morant when he was there. Again, they didn't have the same ability that Memphis had, just personnel wise, to throw at Ja and keep him out of the paint. And so he was able to do a lot of things. It was an easier matchup for him. And so now I'm looking at that with Luka, who isn't like the fast guy. He's not going to get in the paint like fast as John Morant is, but he's going to use his strength to get there. He's going to use his weight to get there. And that's where I'm interested, because I'm looking now and going, okay, they're probably not, knowing especially how much Dallas likes to shoot threes, I doubt that you're going to be doing the thing of just putting 2 to the ball on Luka or trapping him. You didn't really even do that with John Morant, so probably not the thing that you'll see here. And he'll be even done possessions where you have Draymond Green on him. Mavs will probably look to get him switched off, so that'll be an interesting dynamic to see how that works, because everybody else on the Warriors team besides Draymond Like everybody else, I see Luka putting his back to them and just walking them down, basically, and getting to his spot and making the defense make decisions. Even Andrew Wiggins, who is a solid defender, unless he has a really good defensive series on Luka, a really solid one, I see Luka forcing the issue on pretty much every other player. Nobody has proven, like, he just got done playing in a series that involved Mikal Bridges, and he was still pretty successful. There's not a lot that you can do with that. So Luka's the obvious pressure point, but now I'm also looking at Jalen Brunson, because for the first few games of the Phoenix series, he was more or less taken off the table, and I was just going, damn, that's not a good look. He was able to do what he wanted in Utah. I thought the Phoenix series, the first couple of games, I thought that was going to lose him some money, but Brunson came alive, and Brunson is also, so that becomes interesting what you do with Steph, because not that you have to hide him from Brunson or anything, but Brunson is going to force the issue as well in terms of putting guys in the paint. He's going to back down. He's not just going to shoot threes. And I want to see Dallas get to him as early as they can, because I feel like their offense works a lot better when, and it's fun, like Game 7, it's fun when Luka's got his step back going and he's just abusing for a quarter or two. But I feel like Dallas works great when you can get Brunson going early. You can get him some good looks early too, so you can kind of set the tone for him throughout the game. And it's not just Luka. And in the Phoenix game, I saw, again, it wasn't, Luka had the most eye-popping stuff, but you had Dinwiddie going as well, which, again, I don't expect him to just be able to, hezzy between through the leg step back three for this entire series or anything. That was a very hot game, but be interesting to see what you can get out of him. But what I was saying with Jalen Brunson, though, is, okay, yeah, you're obviously going to want to keep Steph off of Luka as much as you can, or Poole, but like Brunson is going to be applying pressure too. And so he's going to see Steph. Hell, he was backing down Chris Paul in this series. That's another thing. They're going to be going straight to that as well. Steph is going to have a very solid defensive series to give them advantages here. And, so that's those are just some points there for Dallas and the way they can attack. And for the Warriors, we know that their offense is solid. They know what they want to get to. And it's going to be interesting because for Dallas, they were able to adjust and kind of shut Phoenix down. We talked about it in that last series recap, how much Phoenix loves the mid-range. Well, it's a totally different team now with Golden State. That's not, it's not going to be Steph just trying to get to mid-range shots and you pushing up on him and taking him out of the series. That's not going to happen. So I'm very interested to see how they end up guarding a team that's going to be far more perimeter oriented. Seeing Ntilikina possibly get himself more minutes in chasing around Jordan Poole or whoever they put him on, Poole, Thompson, Curry. It's going to be interesting to see him chasing them around the perimeter. Their perimeter defense is really going to be put to the test here. So that's it. It's a totally different series against Golden State. And the thing with the Warriors is if they get to their regular shooting numbers, or if they can get to like Golden State shooting numbers, then it obviously becomes a much harder series for anybody. But if it's what it's looked like in the playoffs so far, like, man, Dallas has a really, really good chance. And knowing that they are going to be able to create shots whenever they want, like, I'm interested how many minutes Kevon Looney gets in this series, because at this point, Dallas is really a tough matchup for any. I guess you would say traditional big men, big men that are kind of laterally slow and, don't like to move around the court a lot. Dallas is a hard matchup for any of those now when the floor is spaced as it is. And you have to just kind of stick your big on Dorian Finney-Smith in the corner and hope that he can, move to stop rotation or to stop, paint penetration a little bit, but also reach the corner as well. That's gonna be an interesting thing because Looney's gonna have to see some minutes. It's not like Draymond can just play the entire game. This is a really interesting matchup, man. I could see, I honestly would, talking through it, it's funny because I originally had Warriors in 7, but 7-game series means that it can go either way. Like, fuck, man, Dallas has a way to win this. There's groundwork for them to be able to win this series, which is not something I thought I would be saying coming into it. But just because of the pressure points that they have and the offensive game that they have and the defensive principles that they've shown, like, if they get some help from Golden State, like, Dallas could actually get it. So why am I going Golden State in 7 then? I don't know, but I think it's a 7-game series. I think this one would be 7.
Because they have all the veteran presence, and like you said, what happened in I think it was game 4 when Jaren Jackson Jr. and Dylan Brooks was messing it up in the clutch. Stuff like that could happen. But unfortunately, again, they're going to have to deal with Luka Doncic, and Luka Doncic doesn't really, make mistakes like that in the clutch. We've seen plenty of times, unfortunately. I had to watch it plenty of times where he would make the right move at the right time and end up winning his team's games all the time. But one of the major things I wanted to say about what you were saying is that's why I really do like Jason Kidd as a coach. He's willing and able, we've seen it happen plenty of times, to go out there and make changes when it's necessary. And I think one of the things that he's going to be looking out for is who is the person that Steve Kerr is going to tell Stephen Curry to just chill out on, because he's going to make that immediate adjustment to be like, okay, whoever the person that he is just standing on, we're going to probably substitute the person out for a person that's more, I'm going to say, is probably more aggressive to go out there and try to test Stephen Curry. Because obviously, we know him as the guy that likes to run around screens and stuff like that. He's already running 24/7. Now you would probably want to make him run on defense too, and probably try to test him out when it comes to his stamina and whatnot. Especially since he's still coming off of that ankle injury that he had a couple months ago. So you don't even know what the status of that is right now.
Yeah, for 100%. That's something I am going to be immediately watching, knowing that Dallas, and the way they play, is efficiently create as many shots as you can. So Steph, they will 100% be involving Steph and not just letting him sleep. It's going to be really testing him, because Steph I think he's a decent team defender, but they are really going to, like you said, it's really going to make him work. I guess one thing. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I wouldn't be surprised if they go out there. It really depends on what the Warriors are doing at that time, but I wouldn't be surprised if they run a lineup during the game of Spencer Dinwiddie with Jalen Brunson and Luka Doncic, just to try to get as many opportunities to try to abuse Stephen Curry or Jordan Poole out there when they can. Kind of like what the Thunder did a couple years ago with Dennis Schroeder, Chris Paul, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander with their 3-guard lineup.
Mm-hmm. And that would be interesting, because that's kind of where I was going for Golden State. At least this is the first series where they're not going to have to worry about or have a big concern about how you're going to deal with size. Because Dallas may very well be doing things like that, and we know that they're going to be wanting to play small. Whereas going against Denver, you knew you were going to have to find a way to deal with Jokic. Going against Memphis, as that series drug on, I was wondering how much of a problem rebounding would be, and that's when Kevon Looney really stepped up. Yeah, he stepped up big time, because one of the games that they lost, rebounding was a huge thing, and Memphis started to run Steven Adams, and you know that you're gonna have to deal with Jaren Jackson. So in that respect, it is far different. Dallas doesn't have like a big presence that Golden State is gonna have to deal with. It's pretty much gonna be a lot of perimeter versus perimeter stuff, and so maybe you're not gonna have to worry about. Well, hell, with Luka on the floor, yeah, you still are gonna have to worry about what happens with switches and such. But yeah, there's not some some overwhelming post presence that's gonna put Golden State at some significant advantage. I do think because of Golden State's ability to execute, and the fact that it could literally just turn on. Just because it wasn't a great shooting series in Memphis doesn't mean that you're not going to come out and just have an amazing series shooting wise for Steph and Clay. So with that, and knowing that when that fourth quarter comes, they are going to execute. So if it's close games, which I'm anticipating, and it's 2 or 3 points, and Dallas slips up once, that's all you have to do against the Warriors. Even if they haven't shot well, you just slip up one time. In Game 6 against Memphis, that's what happened. That game was looking like it could get to a Game 7. And Memphis slipped a couple of times and gave Golden State a little too much daylight, and all of a sudden it was a 6-point lead, and they just never looked back. That's literally the difference between that and a Game 7. It's a couple of plays, and so that's the advantage that Golden State has against a lot of teams. And so, whatever. I'm gonna take the safe pick. My official pick will be the Golden State Warriors in 7. I think they'll get to their 6 finals, but I really think that Dallas Mavericks are gonna push them. I would be surprised. I fucked up before. I fucked up the Phoenix and Dallas series. I'd be surprised if Dallas came out and got washed, because I know some people, probably Warriors fans, think this is an easy series for them. I would be surprised if it turned out easy. I think it'd be a challenge. I think Golden State will ultimately advance. So my pick is in 7, but what's your official pick for this?
I'm definitely saying Luka in 7.
Luka in 7.
I know it's Mavericks, but I'm definitely saying Luka in 7.
All right.
I'm telling you, man, he's going to go out there and definitely give you a good 35 a night.
Yeah, before we move on to the East, we just talk about how ridiculous that would be for Luka to be in his third postseason in the NBA Finals, like jumping straight from the first round to the NBA Finals with this roster too. Dallas is not a bad roster, but the fact that there's not another All-Star on the team, it's him and then there's shooters, and they just play really good basketball. This is insane.
Let's compare this to LeBron's first go around. Yep. So we had to deal with a very strong defensive team in the Pistons in the conference finals, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we did.
Guess what Luka's about to go against?
And this is...
I'm seeing a little bit of parallel right now.
Yeah, it's funny because I know this is coming. Like, if Dallas looks like they're going to start winning the series, you will start seeing the LeBron run comparisons before he had other All-Stars. Because more or less, that was kind of every time I talk about this style with this team, I talk about the James Harden Rockets teams and whatnot, but also LeBron too. And it was strong defensive teams with a lot of shooters. Now Dallas, I think, is probably a little bit better than those early LeBron teams, just because I don't, off the top of my head, think the Cavaliers had a Jalen Brunson type player who you could give the ball to and also say create. I'm not sure how many other creators those LeBron teams had. Even Spencer Dinwiddie, when he gets locked in, starts creating as well. So I don't mean to slight the Mavericks team, but also when you just look at rosters and you go down the paper, this is not the team that you would say is a finals team. It's just not. You would say Luka needs another star player. And so this is pretty fucking incredible. If this had, this is, man, get ready for the narratives. LeBron fans gonna have to play some defense, because I know they don't like for anybody else ever to have any kind of help arguments or narratives. Anyways, we will now move on to the Eastern Conference. There's a couple of things to say about these series. I don't think we're going as in depth on them as we did for these two. Milwaukee and Boston. Oh man, watching that neutral must have been great, huh? And not having a dog in the fight.
Yeah, I felt really bad for Giannis though, because I'm definitely a big Giannis fan. But I know for one thing, I was just complaining over and over again. Like, the only bad game Giannis had was that last game. That last game was very hard to watch for him. Mm-hmm. But like, his teammates just truly never came through for him. And I knew one thing they were missing was someone who can just put the ball on the ground and just make a shot. Yep. And Chris Middleton was there on the bench, wasn't able to play. And I'm just like, oh, that's something they needed outside of just, Giannis barreling through people and praying that a charge call was about to happen because someone's happened to be there at the right place at the right time, aka Marcus Smart 20,000 times. Yeah, but you're right about that, because I was over there like, okay, I just want to see Giannis succeed, and if the Celtics win, then hey, at least Jason Tatum gets to go back to the conference finals since his rookie year. So yeah, like you said, it was pretty nice to see from a neutral aspect.
I'm happy to be able to go back to liking Giannis now, because I do love Giannis. But
someone told me he was going to burn the jersey if they end up winning. Was that true?
No. What the fuck? That jersey costs grip. No.
Hey, you was able just to go to a random Milwaukee Bucks playoff game one day. I don't know how much money you got.
Yeah, no, I was not. No, that jersey I got that's hanging up. That's retired now. I'll never wear it again. But it's getting hung on the wall. It's a pretty special jersey. That's the first playoff game I've been to in 11 years now. So that was a pretty cool experience. And so yeah, seeing Giannis in person as well, got to see a masterclass from him and Tatum in person, and it was a lot of fun to see Giannis work up close like that. That's an experience. If you can, I say you should. It's worth every penny. But yeah, this series, I came out, I thought it was going to be Boston in 7. And I thought they would be able to, I thought they would be able to edge out some of those close games that they did, specifically because they were missing Chris Middleton. And you could tell a lot of times how much they needed him, because Giannis could do a lot, but at a certain point, they absolutely needed great shooting nights from other guys. And if they weren't going to get just scathing shooting nights from someone else, knew it was going to be difficult for them to win. And if you pay attention, it's a 7-game series, but the last 3 games Boston was pretty much in complete control of. Like game 5 that they lost, they were in control of all the way until they lost it, pretty much, or they were in the driver's seat of, I should say. And so game 7, they pulled away once Giannis, I think he was just kind of gassed there at the end of the series. And he did everything that he could. It's interesting to talk about how Middleton would have changed it. I Also looking at the fact that Middleton could have very well had some bad shooting nights as he's had this season, as he had last playoffs, but they absolutely needed his ability to be able to put it on the floor, because when you have Grayson Allen out there, if he's not hitting all of his shots, he's a target on the other end. Like, he's a target on the other end regardless, but especially, it becomes a negative at a point where he's not hitting. And then Jason Tatum is able to pull him over on a switch, and now Milwaukee's defense is in hell. So you needed more from the guys that were around Giannis, and you got enough for it to be competitive series, which I thought would happen because I knew how much paint pressure Giannis was going to apply. And knowing the threat of those other guys shooting, I was just thinking, man, that's going to be hell. Just from the scheme standpoint, that's going to be hell. And then Boston lost Robert Williams again, which is, I feel like that's going to be important down the road. But so without Robert Williams, now it was basically up to Horford and whoever else was on Giannis basically to just play one-on-one without having that super athletic roaming guy, that's scary, because once I realized Robert Williams wasn't coming back, I came into game 6. I felt like that was the most predictable 40 ball ever, because I knew how hard Milwaukee was going to go to close them out. I knew what they would go to do that. And, Jason Tatum just had a response. If he hadn't had a response, it'd have went home. So legendary night for Tatum. And I'm wondering what you thought of Budenholzer's strategy in game 7, because it was clear from the start. They were like, okay, we're in the 7th game. Jason Tatum just damn near dropped 50 on us. If we lose this game, it will be because Grant Williams beat us. And he did that from the beginning. He said, we're playing 4-on-5. We're playing 4-on-5. If you have Derek White out there, if you have Grant Williams out there. And Grant has been a good shooter, but that has been a thing pretty much, through a lot of this season. Even with Grant Williams being a good shooter, the question was asked, do teams defend him like he is that guy? In game 7, he was that guy. Did you think that was a good idea to test him like that in game 7 and just kind of live with the results?
Man, okay, so I'm sure you remember how game 1 went. They totally neutralized the paint and told y'all to beat y'all from the 3-point line. I think y'all had, can't remember the stat, I think y'all had like maybe 15 threes and 10 shots within the 3-point line. Mm-hmm. And it was the same story at first in the first half. It was like, I think y'all had like 5 baskets within the 3-point line and y'all made like 7 threes. And I was like, okay, this is looking like game 1 all over again. They're just telling them you can't come into the paint, but you're allowed to shoot threes. They did that, but to a worse extent, because they were just legitimately one skip pass away to an open shooter. And that open shooter was Grant Williams. I do not like the whole just don't let them come into the paint and just let them shoot threes. Because as we all know, the 3-point shot is the most valuable shot nowadays in the NBA. And all you need is a really good 3-point shooter to really set you off. And that's what happened with the Celtics. Because I was telling people that I'm not a really big fan of their half-court offense sometimes, because sometimes it can go really stale. It can just turn into ISOs from Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown. And if they're not making those, then I guess you're just hoping Marcus Smart makes his open 3. But at that moment, Grant Williams became Larry Bird out there, and he made 7 of them, I think?
Something like that, yeah. It was a scathing amount for a game 7.
Yeah, because I'm over here telling people, like, the drop coverage is already bad. Like, if you're just telling them not to come into the paint because you got Giannis and Brook Lopez down there, which they were doing a really good job of. It was like, okay, beat us from 3. Derek White went like 0 of 5, and then he decided to make one in the third quarter. And then Grant Williams went out there and made 6.5 or 4.5. I was just like, That was the worst way to go about it. In that case, they probably should have gone more one-on-one than anything, and just hope that Jason Tatum wasn't about to do what he did again. Which at first he was struggling a little bit, but then he started to do well. But at that point, Grant Williams ended up becoming their leading scorer at one point.
Yeah. It was an interesting strategy. It obviously did not work, but I will say it had me stressed at the beginning, because it's one game. It's one game for 48 minutes. And really, I thought that, they obviously expected Grant to hit some, but I think they were betting that they could get a, 10 to 15 point lead before it really mattered. And that didn't happen on the other end, because Boston's defense stood tall and Giannis didn't have an absolute masterclass. Because if Giannis had the same type of masterclass, then maybe it might have worked. Maybe they would have pulled away at the beginning enough for it to be a big problem.
Go
Go
I
ahead.
don't know if you noticed, but I was telling people that if Giannis wanted to have a bigger impact, he's probably going to have to start shooting floaters. Because if he's going to get knocked out of the game for having offensive fouls every single, every single drive, then it's really going to hurt his team. And then in Game 7, he made like 5 floaters, and I'm like, good. He's not over here getting offensive fouls every time he drives in.
Right.
But at the same time, I think he actually kind of turned off a little bit when it came to aggression. Because I think he even knew that if I end up getting 2 or 3 offensive fouls, that's really going to hurt us because of the aggressiveness that I'm going in. And obviously, again, Marcus Smart is just there waiting for him to drive in. He even had that one really awful fall. The one time he ever tried to block Giannis, every single time he drove in, he tried to get a charge. But like I said, stuff like that is stuff that you have to look out for, because I didn't think they was going to actually have a pretty good way of winning that game just off of that alone. And then, you saw a couple of times when he missed some really point-blank layups. It was really ugly for them. Very hard to watch.
Yeah, the Giannis charges were, it's interesting because not every team will have the physicality to, take those for an entire series.
Oh yeah, there's a willingness. There's definitely a willingness to take a charge.
Yeah, because he had one on I think it was Marcus Smart in Game 7, and it was pretty much. It wasn't a matter of if Giannis was going to charge or not. It was a matter of if Marcus Smart was going to take it, and Marcus Smart he'll do it. Like that's his MO. But not everybody will do it. So that part is interesting. And yeah, Boston, I thought coaching was a really big, important thing here, because I felt like you could visually see what Ime Udoka probably told Grant Williams. At a certain point, he was getting nervous and hesitant because Boston was down, they were getting down 10 points. It was very clear Milwaukee was picking on him by leaving him open pretty much, and it started to get to a point where it seemed like he didn't really want to shoot it. And so pretty sure in that timeout, Udoka told him, look, tonight, launch that bitch. Like, it don't matter, launch it. You've been shooting good all season. They're trying you right now that you like a scrub, launch it. And so I'm glad whatever I was able to keep his confidence level up long enough for him to find a groove. Really glad that it happened, because once it was clear that game plan wasn't going to work, it was a desperate game plan for Milwaukee. Like, it was pretty desperate. You wanted to keep everybody else out of it. 4-on-5 is a way to do it, but it's a gamble.
Because it worked at first, because they had Brook Lopez guarding Derek White, and he went 0-4 from 3, and I'm like, dang, are they actually about to win like this?
Yeah. And Brook Lopez had a good game too. Not only that, they were able to keep him out there at that point, because he was doing a lot on offense as well. He was a big problem. Again, one game. Like, he hadn't been great this series, but Game 7 literally just
it took him all those threes to finally make one. I was like, sheesh. I mean, at least he's doing it in Game 7, but sheesh.
Yeah, shout out to Asher, by the way, who was on the podcast and said that at the beginning. He said, people this season specifically had overrated Brook Lopez's shooting ability. And so, yeah, that was, if he would have been able to, really be Splash Mountain, that might have been a bit of a problem, because he was giving Boston problems for the time that he was out there, but it just wasn't often. Also, shout out to the George Hill minutes. He was wearing green, but it was for the wrong team all year.
God.
My Bucks fans.
Destroying you.
My Bucks friends were stressed about George Hill minutes. That shit was hilarious, but we appreciate it.
Was small, but it was definitely effective for anyone wearing the other color green.
Yeah, I'm surprised he got minutes over Javon Carter. Like, Carter's not great or anything, but
I think he's injured, actually.
Was he injured?
I think so.
Because that was the thing they were saying. Well, why is he getting minutes over Carter? If he was injured, I'm not gonna lie, that one got past me.
Real fast.
Yeah, you just let me know if he was, because that got past me if he was. But
no, he was actually healthy. Okay, yeah, that's weird.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay, I was like, that was why it was so puzzling. But whatever. We appreciate the contributions of George Hill, and that was a big part of it. And not really being able to score while also not being able to do much on the defensive end. Hey, that was good stuff. So yeah, look, hey, it would have been a different series with Middleton. It would have alleviated some pressure. Boston might have lost a couple of the close games. I still think it would have been a close series regardless. This is a really great Boston team, but Middleton would have probably been able to push them over the top of a couple of these. But hey, that's basketball for you, right? That's the NBA playoffs. It's injuries. It's who's the healthiest. That's pretty much what it is every year. So it is what it is. We will now move on to the Miami-Philadelphia series, really for a couple of, just to kind of look at what Miami is made of before we get to this Boston-Miami matchup, because I thought there was some elements of this series that I won't say didn't make me take Miami seriously, but made me see where they can really have issues going forward. Because to this point, we should not have a problem admitting Miami has not seen a real challenge yet. They have not. Atlanta was perfect. It was like, if you stop Trae Young, you stop Atlanta. Miami was perfectly equipped to stop Trae Young. You go against Philly, first 2 games they don't even have Embiid. James Harden is right now is not what he was. And when Embiid did come back, it was like 60% of Embiid. And that series still went 6. Now, I know the NBA is about matchups, so I'm not using that to just say, oh, well, so they won't stand a chance, because I didn't do that with Memphis struggling against Minnesota in my Golden State prediction. However, Philly gave Miami headaches at certain points by cutting on his own, by making Miami's offense think a little bit. And a big thing for them, even in game 4, it's like, they really have to have their shots going. They really have to have their shots going, or else you lose a game like game 4 where Butler had 40, but everybody else really didn't contribute from beyond the arc, and they ended up losing by a bit. I thought that Miami, a positive for Miami, despite the offensive struggles at points, was their defense, because they were able to adjust pretty well to keep Maxey from basically replacing Harden's offensive production. I thought that they did a better job on Joel Embiid, or what was left of him anyways. But yeah, as the series wore on, they did a good job on Joel Embiid and not letting him extend it. They were able to practically shut them out at the end. Obviously, you found something with Max Strus. Obviously, you found something with Oladipo that's really instrumental in keeping Duncan Robinson off the floor, because his function is literally threes, and if that's not falling, he's a target. Now, I'm gonna save, me and you went over the injury report. I'm gonna save that for when we talk about the Boston series. Now, for this series specifically, like, you did good things. This is a defensive juggernaut, as they have been throughout the year. They're the toughest defensive team that Boston is going to face, in my opinion, especially from a scheme standpoint. But before we get to that, I am interested on what you were thinking in Miami and Philly, because when we knew Joel Embiid wasn't even going to be 100%, even if he came back, it kind of felt like you could pretty much see the writing on the wall for Miami to win it. But again, I felt like Philly had ideas that made Miami struggle, that is going to be important, and it's going to be interesting however far they go in the rest of this playoffs, because now they're going to be, whoever they play forever after this, they're going to be competent teams, and they're going to be capable teams. And I thought Philly, obviously, with the state of that roster, especially once they lost Danny Green, because Embiid fell on him, like, they just weren't capable. There's no Matisse Thybulle out here, really. Matisse Thybulle he's literally plays one side of the basketball, and when he's out on the floor, that's a big opportunity for you to give Philadelphia problems. But what were you thinking about the Miami Philly series, like, before and after Joel Embiid?
Yeah, to before Joel Embiid, it was pretty what I expected. I already knew Eric Spoelstra was gonna be like, all right, bam, just go and just abuse DeAndre Jordan, and that's exactly what they did. But when Joel Embiid came in, I already knew also that he was going to serve, if he wasn't doing well offensively, which I don't think he really did well all 3 or 4 of those games, was the fact that he was going to be there just to try to let other people get opportunities as they try to focus on him, because obviously second, the runner-up of the MVP and whatnot. So that's when we end up having that one 30-point game from James Harden. That's when we end up having those couple of good games with Tyrese Maxey. Because even if Joel Embiid isn't out there giving you 40, you would rather have him not doing that and letting somebody else do that, kind of like we was talking about when it came to game 7 of that Celtics series. Like, okay, Jason Tatum can't score 50 again. Let somebody else go out there and end us, which is what exactly happened. But there wasn't really much to talk about when it came to Philly. I already knew they was most likely going to lose. I knew that Bam was going to be able to go out there and limit Joel Embiid as much as he can, especially when it came to him being injured also. James Harden has that hamstring issue still, and he's a step slower, so I didn't think that was going to be too big of an issue, and Tyrese Maxey can't do it all by himself. But when it came to the Miami Heat, my same question from last year stands. If their shot isn't falling, what are they? Because they are this year doesn't count, because not this year doesn't count, but this year definitely serves a lot, because they're the best 3-point shooting team by percentage this year. And Tyler Hero definitely elevates them. But now I'm seeing a lot of their old tendencies come up again. They're starting to miss these open shots. People aren't able to give you anything. And then Jimmy Butler's the only reason y'all are in a lot of those games. In the first couple of games, it didn't matter because, again, Joel Embiid wasn't there. But as soon as Joel Embiid came in, they started looking more and more vulnerable. And I feel like that's, if they don't change that at least, it's going to really hurt them in the long run again. Because that was the exact reason we had that stat of Bryn Forbes outscoring Jimmy Butler, because nobody was able to go out there and hit you a shot. And then if Jimmy Butler isn't hitting you a shot, then that really, really hurts you.
I thought, and to your point about, like, as soon as Embiid got there, it looked a bit more challenging, obviously. But you did see the problems that Miami could potentially have when they're going against squads that can also give something back to them. For one game, and yeah, Embiid he had like one great game. And then James Harden as well. He had probably one quarter where he was Houston James Harden, where the step back was going, where he was able to get by guys, like where he was a scorer that Miami would have to deal with. And that was one of the games that they lost. That wasn't consistent for obvious reasons. And I want to be clear, but I give Miami's defense credit because they switched up. They adjusted, especially for that last game, and they made life miserable for the Sixers. And Danny Green once again being out, so that really helped that. But it does spell like worry when they go against some more capable scorers, because one of the reasons I picked Miami in 5, aside from Embiid's injury problems, was I didn't see any way possible that Harden was going to be able to pick up that load in his current state. Like, he's just, and again, I know there's probably Harden fans that listen to this podcast. Sometimes they have a tendency to be just like Westbrook fans, where if you point out valid criticism or whatever, like, you're hating on their game somehow. I don't even understand how pointing out that Harden is not what he once was is hating on him. I just don't even see, like, if we're watching the same game, I have no clue how that can be classified as hating. But yeah, I hope that he gets better this summer, because, and I feel like, with Harden, a lot of Harden ball is narrative, so it's easy to just say, oh, he's always been like this. It doesn't help his playoff narratives and whatever, but also I am willing to give him the leeway for this season and say that, if he wasn't able to really rehab his hamstring last summer, and then you came in and had to carry the load for the Nets, which obviously pissed him off. That was one of the reasons that he went out. I want to give him one more summer to see if he can get back to what he was, see if he can actually get healthy, or is it just him now? But for right now, this was him. And against Miami's defense, knowing that they were basically able to switch whenever they needed to, knowing that they had a way to keep Duncan Robinson off the floor and limit what you could attack, I did not see how Harden was going to be able to apply enough pressure. And for the most of the series, he wasn't. Even like the last resort would be going to the floater, basically, or depending on that wasn't even really going. And so I feel like that, just like the Atlanta series with Trae Young, I felt like this version of James Harden just kind of fed right into their hands. So to the Heat's potential offensive issues, that's what becomes interesting. This is where I think I'm pretty much done discussing Philly Miami. Aside from the fact that I guess we do have to mention Harden, what he shot 2 times in the second half of the Miami game.
Yeah, he definitely zoned out.
Yeah, and you can give credit to Miami's defense and putting him in certain positions for that, but also, once again, that does not help, because of what people already think about Harden in elimination games. There did not seem to be like, any version of him being locked in and wanting to advance once things got a little bit difficult. It's pretty much more of the same. He doesn't have a good track record with these type of things, but especially not when he doesn't even really feel capable. So that happened in Game 6, and they have an interesting summer now ahead of them. So that pretty much brings us to, one more note for Philly, Tyrese Maxey. They're definitely interested to see where he goes offensively and where his game goes, because that's a whole thing for Philly in the offseason, what they're going to pay Harden, how long he's going to be around, what type of player he actually is. It gets too early to be depending on Maxey. And for this series to be extended, I thought Maxey would have had to have some really, really crazy games, basically, to be able to help them, even get to a Game 7. And when Miami was able to put certain defensive pressure on him, it's like, yeah, especially with everything going on right now, it's just not there yet. So that progression is going to be interesting to see in the future. Now, that brings us to Miami and Boston. This, once again, should be able to objectively say is Miami's first serious challenge of the playoffs. And one thing I'm already worried about is the injury report. First of all, it's also for both teams. So I don't like what I've seen that Boston is talking about. They're hopeful Marcus Smart is going to be playing in game 1. Apparently he had to have an MRI on his foot, so he's already been dinged up from the beginning of the Bucks series. Not sure what's happening there. I'm not even sure if Robert Williams is actually going to be playing, because he was available in the Bucks game 7, but they did not use him. The fact that they had him play probably 4 games before sitting him back out after a knee surgery, that feels like to me his knee is not having a good reaction to being back this early, and they're being really cautious with it. So I'm not sure if he's in any shape to even, really come back and give Boston like Robert Williams minutes. I don't know if he's going to be able to do that this playoffs. I hope for the best, but I don't know. And then there's Miami's injury report. So Kyle Lowry is out. Like, he's just flat out. Then there's a lot of questionable players. There's Caleb Martin with an ankle. There's Max Strus with a hamstring. There's PJ Tucker with the calf, and Gabe Vincent with a hamstring. My assumption is that they're not all going to be out, because if they are, Boston better fucking win game 1. There's no excuse to lose this game if they're missing Kyle Lowry and Gabe Vincent, but then also Max Strus, who is probably going to be instrumental in keeping Duncan Robinson off the floor so he don't get hunted by Jason Tatum. And PJ Tucker,
starting point guard, their backup starting point guard, and then their starting small forward gone.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, and PJ Tucker, so their starting power forward's gone.
I'm gonna assume that at least one or all, maybe all of them end up playing. Like I said, it says questionable, so they could all end up playing, and I hope they do, because I said injuries are part of basketball, but I don't want a run where they started beating teams because half the roster was out. That's not the run I'm looking for here. They beat the Nets fair and square. They got into a tussle with a team in Milwaukee that was still really tough. I don't want to start seeing teams miss, basically everything that they would game plan for. So that is interesting. Now, even with all let's say everybody who's questionable plays, I'm going to start by saying Kyle Lowry, we don't know when he's going to be back this series. And even if he does come back with a hamstring, what shape is he going to be in with this hamstring problem? Kyle Lowry is important, bro. Kyle Lowry is important. Gabe Vincent did not shoot the 3 ball great in the Philadelphia series. Kyle Lowry, aside from being able to shoot, does a lot for this Miami team in terms of orchestrating their offense. But specifically in the last time Boston played Miami, one of the things they struggled with is when you have Lowry on the floor, that's another pressure point. That's a guy who comes off screens and will a Bam Adebayo screen and straight up pull up. Like, he'll pull up from 3, and having that be replaced with Gabe Vincent already feels like it's an important thing. Gabe Vincent brings other factors to the table, but Lowry's shooting and pick and roll game off the bat is something Boston might not even have to deal with, which feels very important to me. I think even at this age, Kyle Lowry is an important part of that. Jimmy Butler, full props. He has been one of the best players in this playoff series. As you were saying, when Miami wasn't hitting shots, he was a lot of what was keeping them competitive. He's even shown, even though I don't believe he shot the 3-pointer as well in Philadelphia series, he's shown that he's going to shoot them, which is very important, because all season, especially as the season started winding down, I really worried about that for Jimmy and the Miami Heat, because I was thinking, man, if Jimmy's gonna basically be not even a part-time 3-point shooter, if he's just gonna be a guy you can fully sack off on, there's no way they're gonna be a contending team. So I'm glad that he's actually showing that ability, or the willingness at least. Giannis showed the willingness. He didn't shoot it well, but he was hitting a lot of important threes in that Boston series. For Boston, so for Miami, this is their first challenge, but for Boston defensively, this is their biggest challenge, because you look at the Nets series. They didn't have a big man that could give them problems. You had Drummond, and they had to throw Blake Griffin out there. They had to throw his corpse out there in that series. That was pretty sad to watch, and he got cooked up. In the Milwaukee series, hell, even having Giannis on the perimeter was actually seemed like a favorable matchup for Jason Tatum. He was showing an ability to separate and get space and shoot threes. And then the other option was Brook Lopez and drop, which that gives you options. If you want to pull up for 3, you can, or if you want to get to a mid range or force rotations, like you can when guys are in drop. Or there's a possibility there for it. Going into Miami, this is the first time they're playing a defense where they're going to be able to switch everything, which is really interesting, because Bam Adebayo is not Brook Lopez. He's not Andre Drummond. Like, Bam will switch. Bam will pursue you. Jason Tatum, if it's a screen, which I highly doubt they're going to be running screens to switch Jason Tatum on, or Bam Adebayo onto Jason. But if that happens, like if there's a scenario where that happens, like he can do it. And so it's not just going to be a drop and thinking and looking and going, oh, he could just get a shot off now if he wants it. That's something that might be just taken off the board immediately. It's going to be much harder to get to. And then you talk about guys like PJ Tucker, you know, even if he doesn't stop somebody, he's going to give them a really tough time on defense. There's significantly less points for Boston to attack here. It is going to be interesting because if Miami starts to struggle, those are the games where you're going to really need Tyler Hero to come out and have good games, but also putting Tyler Hero on the floor means Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are going to be going at him. And if they get into a situation where they have to bring Duncan Robinson out, either because of injuries or because they need more shooting, that is also a guy that is getting attacked. And that's going to really put some stress on Miami's defense. So while Miami has, this is definitely going to be Boston's toughest matchup just from a scheme standpoint. I am interested to see what the Heat have to go to get their offense going that might open things up for Boston. So those are some of my initial thoughts for it. I do also want to bring up Max Strus. Again, we talked about him and Oladipo being great. I don't want to use the word additions in this playoffs, but great finds for them in this playoffs, because Strus is like, he's more than just a guy that runs off and catches and shoots. Like Strus will also, curl off of a screen with the ball and shoot, or curl off a screen without it and shoot. He'll also play make. Like that's the thing that's happening with Max Strus is playmaking. And this is all kind of, it feels like this is all kind of recent. You got him, Miami had a lot of injuries this season, so they had to basically get him into the lineup. And then obviously Duncan Robinson didn't start the season well. So Strus was basically a find throughout the year. And he's going to be like vital to this series, especially looking for points without Kyle Lowry too. It's going to be vital. Those are some of the initial thoughts I have about Boston and Miami.
Yeah, I know for me, don't you remember the last time y'all went against the Miami Heat and it went down to the wire?
Yeah, it did. It came down to like the last few plays and Boston turned it over a couple of times at the end and Miami ended up pulling away. Yeah,
because Max Strus was there for he got a steal on Jaylen Brown when he drove in, and then he got a charge on Jason Tatum. Yeah, Max Strus has been there for a bit. I actually really like how the Miami Heat has just been picking up guys and just developing them through the G League and then bringing them in to try them out in the actual league. And then when they do well, they just stick them on and keep them there. Because, that creates a lot of cheap contracts, unless you're Duncan Robinson, who got paid $90 million. But when it comes to series, I think we're going to see a lot of ISO ball because of what you said. A lot of those guys can just switch on to Jason Tatum and to Jaylen Brown the whole time. They're not going to be able to cross up a Grayson Allen and racism and stuff like that. They're going to be able to just go out there and just have to make stuff happen, because if you give it out to a Marcus Smart, you don't even know what's going to happen, honestly. And then when you have other guys whose jobs are just to shoot, there's not a lot of versatility out there that can potentially happen when you have a full team of people who can just guard 1 through 4, basically. And then you have Bam, who can guard 1 through 5. But when you have injuries that could slowly chip into that, that's when you have opportunities of like, okay, maybe I can do something. Maybe we can do something with Tyler Hero on the floor. Okay, Duncan Robinson's playing 15 minutes. Let's see what we can do when he's on the floor. Stuff like that.
How much? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, but when it comes to like what can happen in the series, honestly, I'm definitely seeing some big games potentially out of Jason Tatum. He knows he's going to have to go out there and make something happen. And now, since he's not going to be able to go out there and abuse somebody, that's still going to add some extra implications for him to do more. It's either that or we're going to see some 79-80 games where no one's able to make a shot, and, whoever just goes out there and wins the bloodbath ends up winning.
Yeah. On that front, I will say that I'm glad that this is the best version of Jason Tatum, because really a lot of it is just that. And he's good and he's developed as a playmaker, but he's a really tough shot maker. Like even in shots where he makes pull-ups and stuff, it'll be because he created a little bit of separation. And especially in close games, I cringe at certain shots when it's a close game and you just go to like a pull-up or something like that. But Tatum is becoming a guy that makes those shots. Yeah, of course, there's the flip side of that when he's off, it looks really, really bad. And the numbers probably don't support me, but it's fun to imagine that like there's just two Tatums. There's one that is just great, and then there's one that's like game 3 against Milwaukee where nothing goes, even the easy shit doesn't go. And so that is going to really be put to the test now, because in Brooklyn, that was the best series I'd seen him play. Obviously, he probably had the best game of his career against Milwaukee in game 6. Against the Heat, they are really going to have to lean on Tatum being able to make some of those pull-up threes. You're going to really lean into him being able to make some of those fadeaways, because I'm not sure how many times he's going to be able to just spin and get to the rim against his Miami defense. That's gonna be a tough task in this series. So Tatum's gonna have to make a lot of tough shots. And then Jaylen Brown too. Gosh, Jaylen Brown, who will take a couple of crosses and then pull up from the mid range. Like you said, it's a lot of ISO, and they might end up having to depend on that quite a bit in this series on the offensive end, because there's just, like you said, with Milwaukee, there was things to take advantage of. With Brooklyn, there was things to take advantage of. For Miami, that is going to happen in limited minutes. And Eric Spoelstra knows when he puts certain guys out there, that's where Boston is probably really going to be going at them. And so he's going to keep that to a minimum if he can. And so these are going to be a lot of defensive affairs, in my opinion. I am curious what you think, how Boston will try to handle Jimmy Butler in this series, because on one hand, he's been one of the best players in the playoffs. On another, this is Boston's defense. This is the first of its kind that he'll be seeing. And I really feel like Boston will be testing him from three. Unless he comes out and he's really hitting threes, I feel like they're going to be testing him so that they can get him to drive and take tougher mid-range shots, so that they can get him to put his back to the basket and have to force the issue. Because he can force the issues against the teams that he's played against, but against Boston, especially if Robert Williams is playing and roaming, which becomes a big thing because if Miami is having bad shooting games, if they're not hitting certain shots, and Robert Williams is actually able to play, that roaming becomes important. They didn't have that in the game that they played them in last. That was one of Robert Williams' first injury games, I believe. So there's that. Bam Adebayo, I think his best quality will be on defense. He's not known as a scoring big, and so it's going to be interesting to see what he does in this series offensively against, who I'm assuming will be his matchup with Al Horford. But I am curious about what you think with the Jimmy Butler matchup. Do you think that's one that they like roam? I would assume like roam, with how good Butler's been in the playoffs, roaming is out of the question on him. Just because you might be able to challenge him on three, you're absolutely not going to just be sticking. Well, at least I would imagine you're not going to be sticking a Horford or a big man on him in general, because Jimmy has an in between game. He has an in between game and he can get to the rim. So you don't want to put somebody slower on him and really open things up. But what type of series do you think he will have against Boston? Because that's really important. Like Jimmy has to have a good series. He has to have a really good series.
To start off, Jimmy Butler's always been a very capable three-point shooter. I just don't know what's happened to him these last 2 years when it comes to wanting to shoot them. Because when I seen him do it in Philadelphia, you could tell that either he just doesn't know what to do or he's just out there just doing it. Because he takes like an actual jump shot, and then sometimes he won't even jump off the ground. He'll just throw it up. He'll just throw it up a little bit. I don't know what's going on with that. But as long as he's making his shots, he's making his shots. But like I said, now you're going to have a situation where instead of who they go against, where you have like I guess not even a Matisse Thybulle, because he even starts. So I'm guessing like a Danny Green guard, and you have somebody even more aggressive in a Marcus Smart guarding you the whole time. Mm-hmm. And you know how he loves having those defensive assignments and how he loves that responsibility. So he's going to be taking that very seriously. But obviously, when you have a person who went out there and scored, 42 points, I think he did? Mm-hmm. 42 points against one of the best defenses in the league, you're going to have to take that one seriously. Yeah. But I think they're going to be eyeing him more than anything until the Miami Heat give the Boston Celtics a reason to do something different. Because like I said, Tyler Hero, after the first round, hasn't really been doing much. Their shooting has gone down, and Jimmy Butler has been the main nucleus when it comes to anything that happens when it comes to scoring. Kyle Lowry's out, so now their playmaking has pretty much been cut. Now you have Gabe Vincent out also, who does pretty decently playmaking wise. I don't know if he's going to be out, but if he does come back in, you don't know if he's going to have any issues that slows him down. So the main responsibility of everything goes on to Jimmy Butler. So I feel like he's going to have to be priority number one on who to shut down until, again, another thing happens to where they'll have to take it more seriously in another area.
And that's interesting because coming out of a series where you just defended Giannis, now they didn't stop Giannis. He had multiple just incredible games, but
yeah, sometimes you can't stop power.
Exactly. But I thought there were 3 games where the process was good on Giannis and he didn't shoot great. There's game 1 and 2 where he did other things, like he didn't have bad games, but at least challenge wise, they challenged him well. And of course, once Robert Williams went out, it basically, like I said, it became more of a one-on-one thing. It was really, really hard to stop him at that point. You trapped where you could and you pressured him where you could, but at the end of the day, you know, when you're missing one of your most important Giannis help defenders, that became an issue. But then in game 7, you know, whether it was more that he was gassed or whatever, I thought there was good challenges there as well. Like, there's good process stuff going on with him for a few games out of that series. Jimmy Butler is really good. He's really, really good, but he's not Giannis, though. He doesn't impose the same will on the game that Giannis does. It's not the same level of physicality. And now, like you said, with Marcus Smart, like, you've got multiple guys to throw at Jimmy. With Jason Tatum, who I think will be starting on him, Marcus Smart will get some of those minutes, and then you're going to have guys waiting on him. So that's where it's going to be really important for the other guys, because Boston is coming in looking at how Miami dealt with Philly's defense in those first 2 games and how they struggled. Boston is looking and going, okay, we're a better defensive team than Philly. We can go to what we have to try to duplicate some of those same elements. And if we get beat by Miami shooters some games, which might happen, that's better than Jimmy Butler. You know, that's better than letting Jimmy Butler look like he was in the finals against LA a couple of years ago. So it's going to be like, if they keep their rotations really tight, it's going to be fascinating, because obviously with help waiting for Jimmy, if that's the route that they go, I don't think you'll see the same level of help that they had on Giannis. But I mean, at this point, Boston, again, they did this to KD and Kyrie, like, they really made them struggle. Again, the process was at least there for a few games with Giannis. Now you're going to Jimmy. If you're, you know, waiting for help, he's a good playmaker too. So you got to limit how much he's like dumping it off the Bam out of bio. You don't want to just let it be a dunk fest with him. However, like, I'm comfortable with Oladipo and Gabe Vincent getting some looks over Jimmy just, you know, dominating the defense. And so I think that's just going to be really, really interesting, man. I think it's going to be really interesting, because if they're able to cool him off and show him a defense that he hasn't seen so far, it really becomes an uphill battle for Miami, in my opinion, at that point. And I'm trying not to underrate them, but like, they really only have to turn a couple of knobs here. Whereas in their previous 2 series, I felt like they really, really, really had to like dig in. Even though they won 4 times against the Nets, if I'm remembering correctly, those games were close. They swept them, but those games were close, and they really had to dig in to keep KD and Kyrie from getting off. And same thing here for Milwaukee. I don't know. I'm not saying it feels anticlimactic going against Miami. This is a really good team. I just feel like this is not the hardest thing that they've had to deal with. That's how I feel. I feel like this is not the toughest challenge that they've had to deal with so far. Personally, going through the bracket when I very first did it, the one that I do before the playoffs, I was going, if they can get past Milwaukee, like, Boston can win it. Because if they can beat Milwaukee, they can beat a Miami Heat team. If they beat Milwaukee, that means they did certain things, and they're going to be able to apply a lot of that to the Miami Heat as well.
Agreed. Because honestly, like I said, when it came to Giannis, it was just like, okay, make him as less aggressive as possible. You know, you saw him taking threes, you saw him taking mid-range shots, and then, like I said, in Game 7, he was probably like mentally changed, because he didn't want to try to drive in on whatever his name is, Marcus Smart, over and over again, because he knew he was just going to be there to take a charge, and he started shooting floaters.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, obviously, it's not going to be the same thing with Jimmy Butler, because he's not like, you know, physically as dominant as Giannis, but at the same time, you can obviously take that morale boost that y'all had of defending and beating one of the most dominant players of all time, and just, you know, being like, okay, now we just have to deal with Jimmy Butler until we see if the Miami Heat decide to turn into what they were in the regular season and knock down a bunch of threes.
Right. Yeah.
Because after what happened to them in Milwaukee, they totally changed their identity offensively. It was like, nope, we're getting 3-point shooters now. We're not allowing that to happen again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the interesting thing for Miami coming in defensively. Well, first, before I get to that part, like we were talking about the star matchups. Yeah, I thought that even without Chris Middleton, having to keep Giannis out of the paint surrounded by shooters was really more of my fear. Like, that was, even though they don't have another guy that really could put the ball on the floor, I was really scared about how you stop a lineup where Giannis is at center and, you know, everyone else around him can shoot. I was worried about how you're going to do that with how much you would have to help and how much you would have to extend your defense. Like, that was the really big challenge to me. And so for Miami, now that they just watched this game 7 against Boston, you pretty much know that shit is not sweet with a Grant Williams or whoever else on here. They've been making their shots a lot of the playoffs, but you're not gonna win by just playing 4-on-5 with Boston. Like that's probably not gonna happen at this point because they'll test it. Other teams might shy away from it or bench a guy. Grant Williams can shoot the basketball, so you're not just gonna take whoever else. Like you're not just gonna take Jimmy Butler and PJ Tucker and go harass Jason Tatum and leave shooters open. And even like Milwaukee chose a couple of times like that in the series. They tried to put a lot of effort towards Tatum in Game 4, and that was the Al Horford game where he got off with his shots. He's also been having a good shooting.
It's very true.
Playoffs.
That is very true.
Yeah. So at this point, Boston is not a team that you can just beat by saying, "Oh, we're just gonna stop one or two guys and that's it." It doesn't work like that anymore. My official prediction of this series. Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces because again, Boston might not play Marcus Smart or Robert Williams the next game. Hell, Miami has a whole questionable list. I do think both of these teams, it will be the toughest defensive matchup either has played, which is going to alter both teams' offense in my opinion. So I'm gonna end up going another 7-game series here. I'm gonna go Boston in 7 because even though I think that this is not their toughest matchup, just like in terms of who they have to stop and how much they have to extend themselves, I am still worried because Boston has shown now in each series like those stretches that I'm worried about where they just can't score, where shit just stops, right? Where Tatum ISOs aren't going, or Brown ISOs aren't going, and Miami is the most capable defensive team that they've seen. Mm-hmm. And they're going to be able to apply the most pressure in terms of not even having to extend themselves again by simply switching and showing defensive pressure. They really haven't seen that yet. And so because it's like because of the injuries in this series for both teams, because of not knowing which Tatum you're going to get once he just sees a switch and isn't able to pick on somebody, because he's been able to pick on somebody in both of the last series, I think it's going to be a defensive battle, and I'm still not taking them lightly, even though I feel like defending a Jimmy Butler won't be as difficult as a Giannis. I'm still not taking the Heat team lightly. I would say Boston to win it, but I'll go Boston at 7 because I think there's going to be some nasty defensive battles.
Yeah, I will also say Boston in 7, mainly because of what could potentially happen with these injuries and just the slump that I've been seeing from Miami. Now, I say 7 because their defense might just lead them the way, and we might just see some heroics from Jimmy Butler too, but it really just depends who some of the players that come in and if the Heat decide to turn back into what they were in the regular season. But honestly, I think this might just be a superstar battle between Jason Tatum and Jimmy Butler. This is what is leaning to come up to be when it comes to all of these defensive pieces around both of these guys.
Yeah, it's gonna be definitely it's gonna be a battle. It's gonna be a battle. Miami, don't
be surprised if you see some games go under 95 points.
Facts. Like I'm really impressed by because Miami has so much defensive versatility and ability. And I do fear their defense more than their offense, obviously. That's the thing. Like I fear those lineups that they put on the floor where there's no crack and now you just have to invent something. And they're able to go to different schemes and confuse you too, because they don't always have to do the same thing, depending on how they guard screens or, who's shifting over from the corner. They just have a million different things that they can do to make your life miserable there. So, I have appropriate respect for them. I have no idea like where Miami and 5 predictions are coming from. I'm gonna assume those are just people. I assume that's like a funny line to say. At this point, if you're looking at this Boston team thinking they would lose in 5, again, I have no problem taking my L. I took my L with the Dallas series, so if Boston did lose in 5 for some reason, I'd just be like, oh, okay, well, fuck me, I was wrong. But like, I don't see this team losing in 5 to anybody. Think it'll be a nasty defensive series. So if that's your thing, defensive basketball is your thing, I think that this is your series. What is your preferred NBA Finals matchup? Like, you're not asking you to make a prediction because obviously we have to see how these series go. Oh wait, well we did make a prediction. Hell,
yeah,
that would be that'd be Boston and Warriors. But like, what is your preferred one though?
My preferred one would be Warriors and Celtics, but I would rather see Mavericks and Celtics.
I see, Luka versus.
But I know a lot of people are gunning for Warriors and Heat right now for some reason.
Yeah, for some reason, because I don't even like. I mean, it'd be fun, but I don't know. I don't feel like it's as interesting as some of the ones you could get. I feel like Luka and Tatum is more fascinating than that, with the two young guys competing for a championship. I feel like Celtics and Warriors is more entertaining than that. And so that's the one that we predicted. But Heat and Dallas, even hell, like Heat and Dallas is more interesting to me than Heat and Warriors, just because of the history there, basically. And seeing that matchup with Luka against the Heat, I think that would be pretty cool. But anyways, aside from just basketball wise, Boston and Golden State is my preferred matchup, and not because, like, obviously I think Boston would probably, just because of the potential of Golden State to go apeshit. If you were wanting to win, you would probably want to play Dallas instead of the Warriors, but I really want to see them get a crack at Golden State. I'm not sure how people have ever felt about that. If your team has had a chance to play Golden State in the playoffs, like, who looks forward to playing Golden State, right? But
yeah, exactly.
No, the thing is, I just think it's cool because they're a dynasty and they've been around since like 2015, and I kind of want to. I'd like to see my team be a part of that story. I think they could win it. I think that'd be a winnable series too. I probably wouldn't prefer it if I thought Boston could, like, if they would really lose it. But I don't know. I just think it would be cool to see my squad get a crack at this piece of history, basically. Like, the Warriors are a piece of history at this point. They're one of few dynasties. Well, there's been a lot of dynasties in the NBA, but they're the current dynasty, and so I would really like to see Boston get a crack at that when they can actually win it. Because in 2018, obviously, I was going for Celtics Rockets. I didn't want to beat the Cavs just to go play fucking Kevin Durant at that time. But now that it's a winnable series too, and I think it'd be a fair matchup, I just think it'd be so cool to be part of one of the few teams that's got a crack at them. Hell, because there's literally only been the Cavaliers and Raptors at this point. Nobody else has had that chance to go at them. So I just think that'd be cool. That's why that's my preferred matchup. But basketball wise, it would be fun too. And if that ends up being the matchup, then we'll be here to break that down and predict it. For now,
yeah, no. For me, I would like to see Luka and Tatum, just to see new school end up taking out old school.
Yeah,
because if it end up being Warriors and Heat, then Jimmy Butler is about to be 33, 34, and then Curry's 30. I think he's like 32 or 33 now. So I'm like, yeah, y'all are definitely just stuck in the past of these guys' primes and whatnot.
Yeah, Luka and Tatum would be really cool, because that would be unlike, and it's Boston Mavs, not discounting everybody else, but obviously they're the two faces of those teams. That would be really cool, because that would be unlike any finals that's happened recently. There's always some old guard in the finals. Always, always, always. Even like last year was really the first time in a while we had something different, and even Chris Paul was a part of that. But still, though, like Giannis and Booker, this one wouldn't, hell, if it was Dallas and Boston, that wouldn't involve any old faces, really. Obviously Al Horford, what I'm talking about is like stars, the star players. Yeah, that's something totally fresh and new, so I wouldn't mind that either. But yeah, I'd like a shot at the dynasty. I think that would be fun. Well, we'll see if it happens. This has been a very entertaining playoffs. Bless up that there are no super teams. This has been so much fun. We are not sitting here just like a couple of years ago, we would have just been sitting here talking about Cavs Warriors already. But this is, any team that's left, I think, is capable of winning a championship at this point. I don't think any of these squads made it here by way of fluke. I think anybody that's left has shown that they have a template there, and they have things that they can go to legitimately make the finals and legitimately compete in the finals. Because all these teams have played each other well too. Boston and Dallas had a really interesting matchup. Boston and the Warriors, that's the game Curry got hurt in, but Boston was on that ass that game. And then Dallas and Miami, like all of these teams, just there's interesting basketball to be played if they end up in the finals together. And there's interesting basketball, in my opinion, to be played in these conference finals. So those are our predictions. Those are what we thought about these series as they happened. Any final words, Vini, before we sign out? You can let them know where to find you and stuff like that as well.
But this has been, again, Alvini Linguini. You can find me on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, basically anywhere you have social media except Facebook or MySpace, because I am 22, not 52.
22. Oh man. Yes, it's been fun to have you on as well. Always love having guests on, and yeah, you are on the watch party sometimes too. So if you enjoy Alvini, he does hop on to from time to time to the mini watch parties that we do. I will be doing those pretty much for every game in the Miami series, unless something, unless some fuckery happens with like injuries or something like that. So that'll be on Twitch, link in the comment section and description. Please rate the show if you enjoyed it. Thanks for sticking it out through this season, through this playoffs, and let the conference finals commence. I will see y'all next episode.